So I'm just going to let it breathe for a hot minute here.
All right.
Let people roll in. And then there's you can probably see the comments. So when people start writing stuff, we'll try to hook into those as well.
Got it. Okay.
All right. I'll wait till 6 and then I'll do my spiel.
All right.
I got it down now. Here we go. 6 o'clock on the dot. Look at us. Hey, everybody. Welcome to At Home with Mark, episode 2. And today, I'm super pumped. I am a gear nerd, as many of you are, and I have been following this gentleman's work for quite some time, and I use several of his pedals. But I am super pumped today because we have the rig doctor himself, Mr. Mason Marangella from Vertex Effects. Thanks,
Hi.
Mason.
Thank you for having me. Oh.
Yeah, man. So, yeah, man. So thank you so much. We were talking a little bit before, but just to say thank you again for making the time. I know you're a busy dude, so I appreciate it.
Sure. No, I really, I always enjoy doing these, and I was glad that you asked. So, my pleasure.
Yeah, man. So I'm starting all of these off with kind of almost like a biography type of thing, and just to give you context. So everybody probably has a story about why they got into music, right? So you have a first love of music via some conduit, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
Mine was playing NBA jams in my buddy's bedroom, and he put Pearl Jam's 10 on, and I was like, I want to play guitar immediately. Right. So what's your story? What's the thing that like lit your fire?
Guitar wise.
Or music in general. Anything that was like super inspiring that you were like, okay, I think I want to do that.
Well, I think probably the thing that got me into music was probably more like sort of jazz, like smooth jazz type stuff. My parents used to listen to a lot of smooth jazz when I was a kid. In particular, the one that I connected to most was Joe Sample, and he had, I think this is probably around early 90s, he had an album called Ashes to Ashes. Coincidentally, the guitar player on that album was Michael Landau. And so I was listening to a lot of Joe Sample because I was always on in the car whenever we go places. And I actually first started taking piano lessons when I was like maybe 7 until I was in high school.
Okay.
Because my parents were not that cool about electric instruments. They like them, I think, in the context of smooth jazz, but I think that they knew that the learning curve was not going to have me like playing like George Benson,
right?
And like here anytime soon, and presumably there'd be a lot of annoyances between picking the instrument up and kind of getting proficient at it. I don't know why they necessarily thought piano was any better, but anyway, so they enrolled both my brother and I in piano. And we played a lot of it was more classical piano because the teacher in the city that we lived only taught that style of piano. But I would go and buy the Hal Leonard books of the music that I was listening to at the time, so pretty soon after that, I really got into this was the early 90s. So I was really into Boyz II Men. They just released their second album, Boyz II Men 2, about the Hal Leonard sheet music of that. And recalling it now, it's hysterical thinking of this classical piano teacher, looking at the sheet music to look at minor nines and stuff like that, in the context of R&B music. And it was so prescribed, the way that she would kind of try to work through the sheet music. Does this kind of sound like it? Because sometimes in the sheet music, it'll just say, play it with a lot of mood, or something like that. But you don't know what that means. You just have the time signature and that's it. So anyway, I did that through high school. And that was good because I learned how to read music and bass and treble clef and stuff like that. And then I started really getting into guitar when I was a freshman. And I still kind of like the same stuff. My parents had a lot of like I said, smooth jazz music. So there's kind of Larry Carlton was in there a lot. Robin Ford. My dad listened kind of fusion stuff. George Benson, people like that. So that was kind of the stuff I was interested in playing, and still the guys that I really like when I think about some of my favorite guitar players. And I just started playing guitar, and I took lessons out of this place called Zone Music, when I was in high school, and that's where Bill Crenard
T-Rock, right?
and Joe from Two Rock first started that business. In fact, when I was a kid, I would take lessons and I would wait out. There was kind of like a, I don't know, like a little waiting area that was, where all the students would wait until their teachers were ready. And it was kind of like this long row. It almost looked like an outdoor storage facility where there was like all these like sliding glass doors and there was little tiny studios. It was this long corridor. And basically the teachers would rent out these studios for, I don't know, the hours that kids were, out from school. So let's say from like 3 to 6 or something like that. And Bill used to have a hi-fi repair shop in one of those sliding glass doors. It was really small, and he'd make these. I think he's mostly just doing like repairs, like turntables or modding preamps and stuff like that. But he was into making amplifiers. I remember I used to talk to him when I was waiting for my guitar teacher because he was kind of like a typical musician. He was like always late and you know,
Yeah.
and so I kind of got to know Bill pretty well as like a 13-year-old.
That's crazy.
Eventually they, started making some really popular amps with the Two Rock amplifiers and stuff like that. But it was kind of him that got me into a lot of that stuff because I would see him like tinkering with stuff and I'd ask him about like what he thought was cool and what sounded good. He was into the whole Dumble thing. He was the first guy that I knew that told me about Dumbles. And that's kind of what got me into this idea where I had some reverence and admiration for these guys that were, building tube amps and repairing them out of a small sliding glass door studio in a small town in Northern California.
That's crazy, man. So
Yeah.
what year did they launch the first Two Rock amp? Because I don't know that. I don't know.
I would say it would be the late 1990s, I would think. When
That's
I
what I
met
thought.
them, it was just called K&M Analog Designs. And I didn't
Mhm.
really even know Joe that well. I think I bothered him. It was like I was just like a 13-year-old kid that was, in their way.
Right.
Not that he was rude, but he had sort of like he wasn't really into entertaining, a kid. But Joe was or Bill was always very gracious with me, and I got to know him pretty well, and still in touch with him and go out and see him every once in a while at his place. And yeah, that was kind of how a lot of this stuff started, or at least it kind of kind of created this interest in this elusive amplifier that was made by this, kind of
Ghost in the
yeah,
corner.
yeah,
Or the Wizard of Oz behind a curtain, one of
yeah.
the two.
He's the Bigfoot of amplifier builders.
Yeah. Man, it's crazy because that was like always, I mean, obviously when I heard Continuum and went down the rabbit hole of like what is John Mayer playing through and like all that stuff and hearing about Two Rocks, that was always an amp that I wanted. And when I was about to turn 40, I think I got it when I was 39, but I was like, I'm getting freaking Two Rock amp. I'm gonna sell whatever I have to sell to get it because you only live once. And man, it's crazy because it's like I did not expect the sound to come out the way that it came out. It's like the only way I describe it to people is like HD guitar.
Hmm.
It just to me has comparative to I have another amp that I use primarily that's like a Class A low wattage amp, but they're just so different. It's like it's crazy. I'd never have played through anything that intelligent, as far as it being it is giving me back what I'm expecting it to give me. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you'll get on a gig and you'll play through an amp and you could have like a backline like deluxe and maybe it's not sounding good that night or whatever. But every time I plug that T-Rock in, man, it does. There's no surprises. You know what I mean? So was that like the beginning for you as far as like tinkering? Like when did you start tinkering electronically? Like was
Yeah.
it around that time?
No, it was a couple years later. So that would have been. I'm trying to think. Let's see. I got into. I'm trying to think of my first year of high school because it was actually 8th grade when I started taking guitar lessons. So that would have been 1998 or 99. So I probably didn't start in any electronic stuff until I was a junior. So it would have been maybe 2001.
Mm-hmm.
And really this was like during the mod craze was kind of starting. So like Robert Keeley was like one of the guys on the scene, and Analog Man and Monty Allams was another guy where you could get mod kits from him.
Mm-hmm.
Um And there was another local company, I don't remember what their name was, but they also sort of would do like these rip-offs of like Robert Keeley mods. So they'd buy like
Oh,
a
that's
Robert
funny.
Keeley tube screamer and they'd say, okay, he's using, this value in R3 and this value in C1 or whatever, and they would copy it and they'd sell it for like way less money. And I was like, oh, well, like that's kind of interesting that they're just, they're just replicating these, mods for way less money. I should do something like that, or I should do something, just to make just to see if I even like it. And so I bought a couple of the kits and I tried, to assemble some of the stuff. I didn't really know a whole lot about anything about how to solder really or any of that stuff. And I had some Boss pedals, and so I kind of like would buy these DS1 kits and mod it, or buy a TS9 kit and modify it. And I just wanted experience. I would do it for friends, and I did one for my guitar teacher. It still works. By the way, it probably
Nice,
wasn't
dude.
my best work if I were to go like, do a little autopsy on the pedal now, but still, and it was sort of that sort of vibe. Like I was buying these kits from guys that were, pretty much trying to copy what Analog Man and Robert Keeley were doing, and kind of maybe using some better components. And by the time I got into college, I was I could solder very well. I knew the basic anatomy of most analog circuits. I went to junior college for 2 years and did kind of like their equivalent for people that would go into like a trade school that were maybe more oriented toward that. It's not like an electrical engineering program, but it's like, I don't know, like a DeVry or a Heald College, or those are sort of like trade schools that exist here. I don't know if they exist in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Um, and so kind of just learned how to, read a schematic, how to look at basic things. And certainly I'm no expert compared to, guys that are fully schooled engineers on this stuff, but I learned how to do all the real basic stuff. And I wanted to mod pedals. I wanted to mod amplifiers. And so I'd put these ads up on Craigslist and tell people like, hey, like I'll modify or repair your amplifier or pedal. And I kind of thought I wanted to do amps because I knew Bill, and that was kind of like one of the things that inspired me. But it turned out when I got into a dormitory that was not okay, because the amplifiers were too big and it kept blocking the doorway, and the kind of the person that monitors the floor, that's like an older student, had said, well, they told us that this is against the fire code. We need to be able to get out of here, very easily. And this is a fire hazard. So you can't have amps in here anymore. So I remember kind of being destroyed, thinking like, oh man, how am I ever going to mod amps? Like, and just having one amp in here at a time, like it's going to be such a logistical problem. And then I thought, well, you know what? I can do pedals, because I could fit like, 200 pedal boxes underneath the bed, because they came, when you get into your dorm, you have your own, whatever it's made out of, maple or wood frame bed, and there's tons of space to stash stuff underneath it. So I would did the same ad. I just changed up a few words and said, I'll mod your pedals, and I know how to do all these mods, and so I named off like the Analog Man this and the, Keeley, whatever. And just had a bunch of people like sending me pedals, because at the beginning I was just doing it for the cost of parts, just because I wanted volume. I just wanted to really make sure I understood how to do it. And it wasn't so helpful in like learning circuits, because I pretty much knew about those circuits at that point, but it was really valuable in seeing like what goes wrong and what stuff breaks, because when you're getting that many volume of Boss pedals and Ibanez pedals and things like that, which is primarily what I was looking at, you can see where the jacks go bad, or what kind of switches go bad, and design things that are problematic, or parts that don't really last very long. And so that was sort of a helpful kind of thing to learn and have some experience, kind of really just doing super technician level repair work for 2 years, before ever even trying to get into anything pedal oriented. So I was glad for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what was the bulk of the pedals that were under there? Was it TS9s mostly?
Yeah. Everybody at that time, wanted to, they wanted to have like a full tone, full drive, but they didn't want to pay for it. And so, the idea of being able to take a pedal that you already had and kind of cheat it into the boutique category for $65, or in my case, I think the parts were really nominal. You know, we were talking $10 or something like that. I mean, the parts probably even less than that. And so I must have
Right.
padded it a little bit, because for a couple of caps and resistors and an op amp and a tube screamer, you know, you can't be talking much more than $5.
Right.
You know, the shipping is probably more than the components. Um, you know, a lot of those.
Well, it's your time
Uh,
too, man. Even if you were like using it as a learning platform to get better at it, like, you
yeah,
did put time and effort into it. So it makes
yeah,
sense.
and eventually I did start charging more, but not a lot. You know, but that was yeah, that was fun. It was a good experience to have, and you know, a lot of those tricks I still use now. And you know, somebody sends me a boss pedal, and I can see that something's a little bit out of whack, or it's just about ready to go, and
Right.
I know exactly what to do. Yeah,
You know what? And then you were talking about soldering. So like explain to me how you get better at soldering. Like it's something that I'm so frightened to mess with any of my stuff because
yeah,
I don't want to screw it up. And I've never soldered, and all my friends like, dude, you gotta learn how to do this because if you want to be swapping pickups in and out and all that stuff, it's not that hard. You shouldn't be afraid of it. So like, and I know you've talked about it on your channel a little bit, but like,
mhm.
how do you get from beginner to intermediate to like I know what the hell I'm doing?
There's a few things. I think one of the biggest challenges for new people to soldering is that they have poor equipment. And this is one of those cases where starting off with a custom shop guitar will make you a better guitar player. You know, um, because a lot of the really inexpensive soldering irons that don't have adjustable temperature, or that can't adjust the tip size, make really hard work of doing instrument cables, where time and heat are really critical things that you need to be monitoring. And if you just have one heat and one size pencil, and one size tip, you're limited in what you can do. And so usually when I see people that are having really a lot of difficulty, they're soldering with something that would even be challenging for me to use effectively, or at least as effectively as I can use something that's good. So the first thing is you have to get a decent iron, and for a decent Weller or Heiko, and Weller is just a US manufacturer. Heiko, I think, is Korean. And they're probably around 100 to $130, and they have variable temperatures up to about 800 degrees or so Fahrenheit. And they have a litany of different tips that you can substitute, because sometimes if you're doing a really small part, like say a power cable or a surface mount resistor or whatever it is, having a really fine tip is valuable, because you don't need a lot of heat to in order to get a good transfer of the solder and solder that component, or solder that wire. And you don't need a lot of heat, and you don't need it to be there for very long. So having a small tip will give you, more dexterity and an easier time in getting to those wires and getting out before damaging anything. And then for an instrument cable, you can use a lot thicker tip, because you're going to need more heat in order to do that. Or a speaker cable is a good example of this. You need a lot of heat because there's a lot of wire there. You need to heat up the wire, you need to heat up the lugs, all that stuff. And even if you're, following the best practices of tinning everything in advance and all that, it still requires more surface area to get that heat transfer happening. So having a good iron is number one. I think two, having maybe two different styles of tips, one that's maybe oriented more for an instrument cable, the other one that's maybe for something that's more small, especially if you're doing pedal boards where you need to be able to do, small DC power cables and things like that. And I think the third thing is just practice on stuff you don't care about, because there is a certain feel to understanding, a lot of people will, lead with their iron first instead of the solder. I usually kind of like put the solder where I want it, and I have, an excess length that's kind of going off the back of my hand so that I can continue to feed it into place. And a lot of people, and I'm not saying that that's the only way to do it, but I think you certainly get a feel for like how long something needs to be on there, how fast the solder melts, how fast you have to get out if you don't want to damage anything. And some of that is only going to come with, a few black eyes in the process. So, buy some cheap plugs on Amazon, and Mogami 2319 is pretty reasonable. And, you don't have to cut long lengths to practice on. You just do, 6 inches and, you know, do it until you feel like you've mastered it and that you got the timing down and you got the everything down, and then I think you'll be fine.
Okay. Yeah, it's something that I know I need to get. I don't like even setting my own guitars up. That's how lame I am. Like I'm
Yeah.
just
I
like,
don't I don't set my guitars up either.
yeah, dude. I mean, there's so many things that I think I could screw up. Now, granted, probably not that much. I mean, I have Sirs. Those are the only guitars I own now. They're all really stable, and I probably only set them up once or maybe twice a year. And they play fine and everything's cool, but like just understanding like relief in a neck and stuff like that. Like it's so basic, and I'm sure we could do it. It's just like I don't want to goof on anything, especially like my pedals. Like you're saying, practice on something you don't care about. I mean, I don't even know if I have anything I don't care about anymore, man. That's the problem. I was
Well,
like,
you don't
you
have to
know,
get into repairing your pedals so much as like, just learning how to solder. I think the easiest place to start is a, patch cable or something like that.
yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause
Which,
you
and I
can
think
get
I told you, yeah, and I think I was telling you about this, but and this is a great segue because I want to talk about these cables. I want to talk about this new horizon because I am super interested, man. I've had so many problems with cables over the years.
Mm.
In the late '90s, when I was touring with my jam band, we had some money, and we're like, all right, here's everybody take this amount of money, go upgrade your gear, and I needed patch cables. So I bought instrument cables. I bought Monster cable, instrument cables. I bought Monster cable, patch cables. Those things still work to this day from the
Okay.
late 90s. I've never had an issue with those. And then at some point, I hooked up with George L. and I got
Mhm.
cables. I got endorsement with them, and they all failed, man. And I had all these like friends and people who had all this amazing luck with George L's, and I just didn't. And I don't know what. I mean, I didn't treat the cables any different than I treated the other ones. And
Mhm.
but the stuff that you're doing and like that video that you guys posted with the difference between those cables was fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about it because I don't know if everybody's aware of what I'm talking about, but basically tell them what's going on with these cables and everything.
Yeah, and I presume that the video that you're referencing is the shootout of the cables, or is it a different video?
It was the shootout. It was fascinating to me, even through the internet, listening to it.
Mhm.
It's
Sure.
fascinating.
Yeah. So to just a point to clarify on the shootout, those were instrument cables that you would use only for the purpose of going from your guitar to the pedal board, or from the guitar to the amplifier if there was no pedal board involved. The patch cables, the findings of the video have much less relevance in that particular context. But we
Hmm.
can talk about both things if you want.
Yeah.
So for the purposes of patch cables, um, in George L's in particular, the I would first say that there's nothing wrong with George L cable. The cable, the wire in and of itself, I have no objection to, as far as, you know, that it couldn't work for people. I think that it's fine. It's very low capacitance. In fact, I think it was one of the first kind of ultra low sub 20 picofarads per foot instrument cable that was out there. And so all credit where credit's due to George L in terms of the wire. The problem that most people have with them, and the reason why I don't recommend that people get them, is because they're primarily designed to use in their solderless plug that they've designed the cable for. And so if you're trying to use George L, although it's possible, and I've done it, to solder it to a standard, switchcraft plug, for example, or a Neutrik plug, it's possible to do that. It's not really designed for that, and it's very difficult and time consuming to repair the cable for that particular type of application, because it's not designed for that. It's designed to go into a housing that either pressure fits it, and then you have a nut that also acts as the housing that screws the whole thing together, and then you're relying on that tension of the screw to kind of hold the cable together, and fingers crossed never comes undone.
Right.
The challenge with that though is that you're, as a musician, you're in a high vibration environment. If you're on a stage and there's a drummer and there's a bass player, you'll have vibrations pulsing through your pedal board every night. And then add to that that if you ever are changing pedals or adjusting the cables in any way, this is further deteriorating the quality of your connection, because again, it's only the tension of the housing that you've screwed together, and I think there's a set screw only on the straight connectors, but even so, the same thing applies there. All of the internal parts of the cable are all, free floating to the elements. So any sort of oxidation that occurs as a result of being exposed to the element, it's not gas tight. That's going to create corrosion and oxidation of the metals in there. That's going to add resistance, which is going to be a problem. And the quality of the connection is being eroded simultaneously while it's working itself out of the housing anytime you move it, anytime it's vibrated. And the compounding of those things results in failure ultimately. And a soldered connection equivalent to that just is not at the same risk that that's at. So if you love George L cables and you say, well, these are the sound for me, fine. I would just say solder them instead of using the required solderless plugs to assemble them with, because those are really the problem. It's not the cable necessarily. That's
Right.
true of most of the solderless systems.
Yeah, and I know it was a big hot topic a month or so ago. That was like it was like the thing that was going on, as far as like all the social media presence and stuff. I find all that really fascinating because being a user of all this stuff for years, I mean, I'm always looking for ways to have more reliable,
Mhm.
equipment. And cables has been like kind of I don't know, a struggle for me the past maybe 10 years. But like when I saw that and just kind of reading up on everything that you are doing and stuff that you've talked about on the channel and everything, I was like, man, okay, so I'm going to check out, I'm going to check out those cables for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I want to jump in. So this is kind of how, I met you
Oh,
a
yeah.
long time ago.
Yeah.
So a long time ago, I hit you up about, getting one of these, and, being a newbie to, I guess, the Vertex brand and products, like I didn't own anything before this,
Right.
but, like this thing is so amazing in terms of the versatility of it.
Mhm.
So, I mean, cause I can get it sludgy and fuzzy, and I can get it sounding like Stevie Ray.
Mhm.
And so when you were kind of developing this in particular, because was this the main kind of flagship that launched the kind of social media presence that you now have? This wasn't it?
Well, I mean, I would say it depends on sort of the timeline. Like we had our boost that had come out before that in
Which I need to try.
2014. And that one had some buzz because, Robin Ford had done this video for it, with his Dumble and all that stuff. And so that was kind of the first maybe really professional production that we had on with using artists. In particular, that was probably one of the first really big ones. And then when the dynamic distortion came out, my plan was to get as many stylistically dissimilar people that were sort of the masters of their particular domain, at least as far as social media was concerned, to do demonstrations. So, we kinda
Mhm.
try to get something that had more of like an indie rock sound, so I got like Mason Stoops, and we try to get a guy that had more of a worship sound, and so I got somebody for that, and then I wanted somebody that kinda had more of like a Hendrixy kinda Stevie Ray vibe, and I got a guy for that. And so I really try to get people that I thought really embodied all the different sort of personalities that are possible in the pedal, and then really have them do demos that explicitly focused on that, and then I just serve them all out in parallel, and it seemed like, at that particular point we didn't have a whole lot of dealers, and so sorry, I think one of my lights just went out. Let me
It's all good. You still look handsome, bro. There you go.
There we go. So in any case, what was I saying? Yeah, so we served them all out in parallel, and there was one of those videos that was kind of for everybody, and that was helpful to us because sometimes you show a demo out that you feel like encompasses your device, and it doesn't connect with people in the same way that it connects with you. And so
Mm,
one thing that is been helpful from a business standpoint, at least in marketing the pedals, is sort of being dispassionate about what the particular who the vessel is that best demonstrates the product, even if maybe that's not the way that you envisioned the product's application. If there's one guy that for whatever reason just speaks to the audience best, you have to be okay with that and sort of able to surrender your preconceived notions or expectations about what's going to be the funnel that people really want to go down when they're considering buying this particular product. And
mhm.
so dynamic distortion was, I think, kind of the first time that I was able to evaluate that and actually make meaningful choices in the marketing of the product.
Okay. That's interesting. I feel like because this pedal is so diverse, it's like it
Mhm.
was on my lust list for such a long time. And then I was like, I'm getting one. Like, it's like, because I told you before we started this, we were talking about it, but, I saw it so much in my feed on like Facebook and stuff. And I was like, and every time I saw it, even if it was a different player playing it, I'm like, dude, there's so much I could use that thing for. Did it take you a long time to develop this because of the versatility of the pedal?
Did it take me a long time to develop the marketing plan or the
No, the
circuit?
pedal itself. Yeah, the circuit.
No, I mean, the circuit isn't really anything that unique. Basically, what I was doing is I was just modifying these Maxon pedals for a lot of the LA guys, like Michael Landau and Scott Henderson, and who else did I mod one for? I think Dean Parks I modified one for. Like a lot of the LA guys, they
Mhm.
just wanted this SD9 thing because they had heard that I had done one for one of their friends, and it was pretty much just an SD9, and I kind of made it work more like, oh, the other guy I did it for was Wayne Krantz.
Who
Um,
is, by the way,
yeah,
my favorite guitar player,
yeah,
like ever, like
he's
ever.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
and so basically, it kind of just optimized a few pieces of it and kind of changed the tone control a little bit to kind of make it a little friendlier. And, that was it. It was probably like it was 85% still in SD9. I didn't change a dramatic amount about it. I just sort of optimized a few areas where I thought that it could be improved slightly, and that was just kind of what these guys wanted. And so I basically just took the mod and I transplanted it into the dynamic distortion.
Okay.
So it's kind of like I would say that it's certainly it's certainly very close to a sonic distortion. If you were to take it out and reverse engineer it and write the schematic, it would have quite a bit in common with that.
Okay. That's interesting because I had an SD9 for like a minute.
Mhm,
I bought one. I was like, oh my gosh, this thing sounds so brittle. It's like it has so much, it has no bass to it. It's very trebly. It's a lot of
mhm,
hissy high end. So
yeah.
is that what you were fixing? Is that stuff? So it wasn't so brittle?
Some of it's that, and some of it is just sort of like changing the input gain a little bit, and basically all those guys were using strats with the volume rolled down because a lot of those guys like Scott Henderson and Mike Landau, they're very rarely wide open on the guitar. All the tone controls and the volume controls are constantly being manipulated. And so the first thing was sort of simulating the loading that would happen when you have passive guitar pickups with a 250K pot that's rolled down to 6. And the dynamic distortion, as does the SD9, behaves much differently when you have that going on, when you have
Mhm.
this loading occurring, and the pickups also will roll off some high end when you roll down the volume, unless you have a treble bleed circuit or something like that in your Strat. And so some of it was developing that, so that was sort of part of the sound, you know. For them, I didn't do that exact thing because they were already doing that, but I knew that the 99% of the people that were gonna go to a store were not going to, as a prerequisite, turn their guitar volume down to 6 so that it could work.
Who does
So
that?
yeah, so I basically built the feature as in there, on the input section. I changed some of the tone control circuitry to kind of get the peak to kind of be in a little bit different place, really kind of adjusting the cue, of the tone control, and then just kind of smoothing it out a little bit more so it wasn't such a the distortion had a little bit more definition and warmth and didn't feel so hard. And those were really the only things that we were doing. And I know, you said you owned one. It seemed like, to you they didn't really sound that similar. And I think that that's sort of the unspoken secret of our industry is that you can change very little and it can have a dramatic difference in how something sounds. It's just like if you
Mhm.
hand, Emeril Lagasse and Mario Batali and, fill in the blank other famous chef, and you give them the same steak to cook, they're gonna, they'll all be ribeyes, but
Yeah,
they're gonna be really different depending on who's at the helm.
yeah.
And I think that that's the thing that I think is overestimated and underestimated about people that are building pedals. Like, oh, it's just a this, but you can have just a this that sounds completely different than the original this,
Oh, dude.
by changing very few parts. And I think that that's I think that being original is incredibly difficult, in that
Mhm.
regard, with pedals.
Especially with an overdrive circuit. I mean, how many? I mean, I own. I don't know how many overdrive pedals I own, man. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not. But like, what I dug about that pedal too is just like it can get fuzzy, you
Hmm.
know. And that's why I was like, this is probably one of the most versatile overdrive distortion boxes that I own. So it's like I can leave it on there. So on any given night, if I want to get that 808 sound, I can get it through that, and I could leave it at that setting, and that could be my Stevie sound. I can also kind of put it in front of the chain and get it fuzzy and
Right.
stack it. It just does so much. So bravo on that for sure.
Thank
I
you.
wanted to ask you, so with this guy,
Okay.
what's going on here? So are we changing sizes of pedals? What's happening? Are you going in this direction? Or is this just like we're gonna do this one-off thing? Because I love the pedal. I mean, they're both small, they're not gigantic or anything,
Mhm.
but this is so great. I love when this came out. I was like, oh, a little bit smaller. um it's a great pedal, by the way, too. I leave this on. I had to take it off my pedal board.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Hopefully that didn't disturb your George L's.
They're not there anymore, bro.
Okay.
uh, so
Uh,
what's going on there?
yeah, so when we had originally designed our enclosure, it was back in 2014 with the boost, and in fact, the enclosure, the mechanics of it were designed well before that. And the idea was basically to have something that would equal the surface area of a standard Hammond 1590 style enclosure, a Robert Keeley compressor size or an MXR Phase 90 size, to basically take up the same amount of room that those would take up on a pedal board once jacks were in them. And I think that some people that look at our pedals and say, well, because ours, obviously, they're not coming from the same source that everybody typically sources their enclosures from. Ours are all custom. They have their own shape. There's nothing that looks quite exactly like them. Um, and so anyway, I think that when people don't have a reference, they automatically think it's like the size of like a Pete Cornish pedal or something like that. And so for some of them, I have to show them like, okay, well, here's the Robert Keeley compressor, here's the Jackson, and here's the DC power cable. It's as big as our pedal is, on a pedal board, and that's kind of what our thinking is. My background is in, system, design and rig builds and stuff like that. And so I'm just looking at like how much space does it actually take up when it's in its context, and we're gonna use the enclosure size to basically replicate what a 1590 would be. And this is kind of before the mini pedal craze really took hold, so that wasn't something that I had in or foresaw in the popularity that it has and has become. So we
Mhm.
made those as the standard, and that's why everything was in that size box. And it seemed that, like, even though we can't redesign the ergonomics of the foot, people still want pedals that are really small, or seemingly as small as they could be. And so, the steel string was our most popular pedal and has been our most popular pedal of all time. We've sold over 10,000 units of that. And,
Man.
so there's a lot of them out there. And so we decided that we would make a small version of it and just see, if there is what the threshold is for people that are, do they love this so much that they're willing to buy this pedal
Mhm.
again. Really pretty much the same circuit. The only difference is you have that added rock jazz switch and it's smaller. And it
Mhm.
seems as though it is, so we're going to start converting. The next one that'll be converted to that size is the Boost.
Oh, I have
And
to try that, man. Like I have a couple friends who have it, and I had a. Do you remember there was a company called Faro? Do you ever remember hearing about that company?
no.
Oh man, I should have had it out. It's like it's in a nondescript box. It's a square. It has
Hmm.
one gigantic black knob on it,
Hmm.
and it's just a boost.
Hmm.
But it's like I think it's a class A boost.
Okay.
And that's something that I always loved having, and it doesn't work anymore. And I'm like, I couldn't find the company if it even
Mm.
exists. But anyway, not to cut you off, but like continue. So
I don't even remember what I was saying, but
I'll look
that's
it
okay.
up. So the
Um,
boost, you said you're going to
yeah.
shrink the
Yeah,
boost.
that'll be the next one that'll go into a smaller enclosure. The challenge is, though, is that it has this expression port on the back of it that you could use to insert a volume pedal,
Mm-hmm.
with the boost, and they could control the boosted output.
Right.
And the challenge with the boost is that it has 3 jacks on the back, because you have the input, the output, and the expression insert, and then you have a DC connector, and those are all stacked next to each other, and so that sort of determines the width of the box. And so in order to shrink it to the size enclosure of the steel string, you either have to go with a jack on the side, which will make it wider once it's on a pedal board, once you insert a jack, because you have to now go wide, or we had to convert the TRS jack to an 1/8 inch, and
Mm.
then it could live opposed to the 9-volt DC connector on the back. So that's what we opted to do, is go with the TRS 1/8 inch. That'll be chassis mounted, for the reliability purpose. And not everybody used that feature of the boost, but we definitely didn't want to do without it, since that was sort of one of the key distinguishing features that it had, that nothing else had at the time when it came out.
Okay. Man, I'm excited to see that. That's cool.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you a little bit about before we run out of time. I want to talk to you about the Nile,
Okay.
because as a guitarist, there's a lot of people who are like, I hate compression. Like compression's the worst, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I never really understood it. I bought Wampler's mini ego
Mhm.
like a couple years ago, and using it on acoustic gigs. Like if I'm just playing solo acoustic, it sounds awesome with my acoustic. And then when I put it with the electric rig, just having a little bit of compression, I feel like does something for, especially for like an anemic amp, if you're playing through something that's a little bit smaller, whatever.
Right.
But so like, were you like, I want to do some compression, or was there like demand for you to do it? Like, I'm just curious, because that's another lusty pedal been looking at of, of yours,
Yeah.
because there's so many. I mean, so there's like Origin Effects makes this stuff like the slide rig, and
Yeah.
those are
Yeah.
cool. But I like how yours has that preamp kind of push in there as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Well, I was really trying to make it sort of like a channel strip, like in a pedal. And I thought that Origin did a really good job of emulating the 1176 thing, but I think that when you look at its application amongst sort of the most famous users of that particular studio device, invariably they were using that, and then they were going into some sort of mic pre, and that was kind of part of the sound too, because the compressor can only do so much EQing and affect the sound so much. And a lot of the sounds too that we like with the Beatles and with Led Zeppelin and stuff like that has to do with the distortion of the interplay between the mic pre and the compressors. And it's not so easy to get gain that amount of gain out of those compressors, because you can't, at least to my knowledge, I don't see where you can overdrive using the input to overdrive the output section on them. Maybe
Okay.
there is an option to do that, but I didn't notice that in theirs. And so the idea is that we could create those two things, sort of like a classic 70s, kind of British style preamp, and have the compression circuit, and you could have them each foot switchable, and so you can engage them or disengage them if you wanted. And you would have sort of a channel strip and a compressor that resembled, the classic rack compressors, and one that, and a preamp that emulated the classic mic pre's, that you'd find in a console or studio desk, and be able to have them both there. And so you could do those adjustments, you could go direct with it, and you could get some of those kind of really classic Prince or Nile Rodgers type thing, as kind of the name implies.
Hmm.
Or you could use it in a pedal board context, and just use it as kind of a little bit of a tone shaping and maybe a limiter if you wanted it to be pretty subtle. But it does reflect more of the subtleties of what an 1176 does. And we on pedal boards, we sort of confuse a lot of the, it's funny when I see people talk about using the origin effects. This is no slight on the origin effects. This is the user will then put it first, and almost in every studio recording that you would ever see, the compressor comes after, after the signal. So you wouldn't,
Hmm.
the compressor doesn't come up in front in the guitar and then goes through all the processing that it does after the
Right.
fact. Usually the compressor is coming after all that. Um, and so, we're sort of using guitar compressors in this unusual fashion that's actually sort of dissimilar to the way you'd see, compressors or effects used in a mix bus in a studio. So I was kind of trying to make it more appropriate to the way that you would see it used there. Now, of course, people still use it in the beginning of their chain, because I think that a lot of guitar players are used to that sound, um, which I understand. But this is kind of giving them the ability to have a channel strip on the floor, and they have their sort of 1176 thing. They have their Neve style preamp. They can adjust them however they want, and they can control them independently of each other if they don't want to use them together.
That's cool, man. That's so cool. So that was like the Lowell George kind of thing, is like he would
Yeah, I
have his
mean,
rig run through, and then at the end of the chain would be the compression.
a lot of that, yeah, because they would compress after the mic, you know.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
man, I just started
I
getting into Little Feat. I feel bad that I wasted a
uh,
lot of my life, my life not listening to them.
well, if you saw him on stage, he was using all Dynacomps, you know. So a lot of the live
Mm,
performances are like two Dynacomps, that are for different, I presume different outputs. Maybe not the same level of compression. I don't know. But I know in the studio, apparently it was said that he used 1176s for that sound. And then, you know, typically, I mean, you see a lot of guitars at that time just going straight into an 1176, and then it would just go right into the mixer.
mhm.
Um, and I don't know exactly what his recording techniques were, but I knew that he definitely used an 1176. But I wouldn't, I don't know that he would have gone right into it and then gone into his Dumble amplifier. Um, I don't even know that it would have actually taken the level coming out of an 1176 into the input of the Dumble. It was so sensitive to stuff like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I like I mean, there's so many slide players that I love, like Ariel and Joey, that they don't use compression. But then, you see, like when I was growing up listening to Fish, like you see Trey has a Ross compressor. You're like, what is that? And
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know. I mean, have you done a lot of research? I know you guys been doing some dead stuff. Um, have you done a lot of research into Bobby and Jerry's rigs, and like kind of dug deep into how they're getting those tones?
I haven't done a lot of research on the dead stuff. The only stuff that I really know about their rigs is just through like kind of like the books and things like that that you can find that were about that particular sort of stuff. Like I have like a coffee table book that has like,
Mhm.
Jerry's rigs over the years. But a lot of that too, similar to Lowell George, is he had those like Stratoblasters and stuff like that when he was using single coils and different sort of alembic preamps and stuff like that, and those would create a certain amount of compression. I don't recall any dedicated compression pedals. It's not to say that there weren't. Maybe later on with the bot when he was using Boss stuff and MXR and stuff like that. Maybe he was using some then. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
But no, I haven't dug into what it is that they're using. Although my friend Gabriel Bergman, who used to work for us, he's a huge Dead fan and has all those rigs down. So whenever I need to ask a Dead Gear specific question, I usually call him up.
Nice. Because it's, if you listen to Bobby and Jerry, I mean, first of all, I just started getting back into Dead. I said this in my last one, but my older brother's a huge Deadhead. So
Mm,
I grew up on that stuff. But if you listen to them independently, how different their tones are and
mm,
how well they sit in the mix. I mean, those guys were meticulous about what they were doing
yeah.
out of the front of the house. And I don't, I can't recall. I mean, there's jam bands today like Mo and Humphreys McGee and some other cats that are doing the two guitar thing, and it's definitely distinguishable between who you're listening to.
Mm,
Um, but it's not only, kind of getting into what they're using is one thing, but like the voice of the player obviously is a whole nother thing.
mm.
But out of all the bands you can think of, that band, just you can tell who's who immediately, immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly Bobby always was really bright and yeah.
Real bright. I'm not
Yeah.
sure like I can't even tell what that dude plays through. I was supposed to go see Dead and Company this summer with my brother, but and I was looking forward to that to see what was on stage.
Yeah.
But it always just looks like they're some combination of Fender amps, or I know John was
Yeah.
using some PRS stuff for a while, and
Yeah. I think the last time I'd seen, because they're not too far from me, in Marin County, which is maybe 20 miles kind of northwest of here. Uh, and I think he was using these amplifiers called Fat Jimmy, which I think is like I think he makes like Vox and kind of classic Fender type things, and that was what he had. And
huh,
but it almost sounds like direct. It's pretty like unforgiving
it
kind of
is.
sound.
Which is great, and it's so interesting because he's such a good player. Like if you really listen to what he's doing rhythmically,
Mm,
comping behind that band, behind what whoever Jerry or John or whoever is playing over top of it, like that dude is such a great rhythm player.
mm,
And I think I took that for granted for a long time. Only until recently did I say to myself, like, you need to listen to that cat
yeah.
because he's got some serious chops going on harmonically, and I don't know, man. But all right, well, I'm gonna ask you one more. I want to ask one more question, then we're gonna do our lightning round.
Okay.
Um, are there any? So you talked a little about smooth jazz in the beginning of this and how
Okay.
your process was, but are there any bands or music or albums that you're like are little secrets of yours that maybe nobody knows about that you love that you would be like, you should check this out?
Let me look at my Spotify thing and kind of look there. There'll be some recency bias in this. Um, let's see. All right. So lately for like 80s guitar tone, I've been listening to Steve Perry Street Talk, first
Okay.
Steve Perry album. Um and that's like the one that has all his kind of solo hits like Oh Sherry and that stuff.
Yeah.
But
Nice.
but all Michael Landau on guitar, there's some really cool guitar stuff on there. So I've been listening to that in terms of my 80s kind of music. Let's see who else I've been listening to. Um all right, so this is kind of a find. I don't know if you're gonna be able to find this, but Eric Clapton had a like a I don't even know how to say this, sort of like an alter ego band before he came out with Pilgrim. Pilgrim was
Mm.
the one that had the hit on it was My Father's Eyes.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And so he had this band I don't know who was in it except one of the guys was him, and the singer was what was the singer's name? Like a
Oh, so
pop guy.
he had another singer on the record.
Yeah, he didn't. Eric Clapton didn't sing on this, and it was like the warm up record for Pilgrim, and they were kind of experimenting with, sort of more like electronic music and kind of like some drum machine stuff and kind of like some different sorts of guitar tones.
Hmm.
And the band was called TDF, like Tom, David, Frank,
Okay.
TDF. And the
All
album
right.
was called I think it was either called Retail Therapy or Reality Therapy. I don't remember which one it was. It probably is Retail Therapy.
I
But
hope
anyway,
so.
but it's really cool. It sounds really good. And I forget the name of the singer. It's somebody you would never expect. Um
I wrote it down. As soon as this is over, I'm gonna go check it out. See if I can
Yeah,
find it.
let me see if I can find it. So it's TDF, Eric Clapton, and what's the guy's name? Try to see if I can find it on here.
I hope it's super random.
It's somebody that you wouldn't expect. Somebody that you're totally not going to expect. He was like a '90s R&B guy.
Oh,
Um,
that wasn't. It's not like Babyface, is it? Because of like his beginnings of.
it kind of he kind of has a little bit of a baby face vibe, but it's not baby face, which would make more sense. Tony Rich is his name.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm gonna check it
Tony
out.
Rich. Yeah,
So is it
so
leaning like R&B leaning at all, like that record, or is it more
it's
80s
kinda
ish? Like,
it's all over the place. So it has, like it came out probably in, like, the mid-90s, maybe '96 or '97. It
okay.
has, like, a lot of, like, weird sort of synthy stuff. It's, like, not like any Eric Clapton air album you've heard, and the guitar playing is a little heavier, and it's got
Okay.
some, like, quite a bit of acoustic, and, it's an interesting album. So, anyway, I've been listening to that, and then, let's see, what else have I been listening to? I'll give you one more that, alright, good really good guitar tones, really good mixing. Bonnie Raitt, "Nick of Time"
Oh
is
yeah,
another one I've been listening to.
yeah. I love that record. She is like, talk about like the full package of singing and playing, and man,
Yeah, and sh
whew,
and she was in Little Feat.
man, that's the thing. Have you watched any of that? It's on Amazon. There's like a Lowell George documentary. Have you
Oh,
watched any
really?
of that?
No, no, I haven't watched
Yeah.
it.
So Joey told me about it in the last episode, and I was that night I pulled it up and started watching it. It's really interesting to like dig into that scene in LA. And first of all, shame on me again. I had no clue that Little Feat was from LA.
Yeah, they
Like,
sound like they're from Louisiana or something like that.
yeah, man. I totally was like sold on that. Like I just like hook, line, and sinker, but super cool to like understand where they came from and that dude died. I mean, like Lowell died, I think he died in 79, which was the year I was born, like 16 days after I was born. And
Mm,
I was like, man, what would that dude be doing right now? You know, it's such a shame. But
yeah.
I mean, better late than never, right? As far as the music's concerned.
Yeah, and he had that one
So
cool solo album, there's that one little solo album that's pretty good.
yeah, and Joey told me that some of the critics kind of crap on that record, which I was like, what?
Well,
You
I
know?
mean, some of this stuff, it later on, it lives on better. Like when I talked to Dean Parks, he was saying, what a nightmare it was to make Asia, and how every day, the studio executives were like duking it out with their managers in the lobby of the studio, because they were like $1 million over budget in the '70s, and a year late, you know, and we were talking, he's like, because I was too young to know any of this stuff. He's like, well, that like Asia, like it didn't make any money until like 10 years after it was out, because it was so
Oh my
over
gosh.
budget. And so it's kind of
Whew.
funny to think of what a classic album that was, but how commercially, like, it took them. I maybe it wasn't 10 years. I could be misremembering that, but it was like a certain period of time where like it didn't break even for a longer than normal amount of time because of how much it costs, to
Good
audition
God.
every guy to play a solo. They're like, okay, Jay Graydon, okay, Robin Ford, okay, Larry Carlton,
Let's fly in all these A-listers and
right, yeah,
that's crazy, man. All right, you ready to do some lightning round for the end of this?
sure, lightning round, go for it.
All right, let's do it. So here we go. All right, Lennon or McCartney?
McCartney,
Strat or Telly?
Strat,
Nunchucks or bow staff?
nunchucks,
Harmonic or standard tremolo?
standard,
Telephone booth or DeLorean?
oh, DeLorean,
Of course. Top or side mount jacks?
top,
49ers or Raiders?
49ers,
Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Curb Your Enthusiasm,
Bobby or Jerry?
Jerry,
All right, last one. This might be tough. It might not.
okay.
In-N-Out or Shake Shack?
I can't answer that question on the ground. They're not equal. They're not equivalent.
Okay.
In-N-Out is like a Toyota, and Shake Shack would be more like, an Audi or a Mercedes or a BMW. Like you can't get the same. You can't get them for the same price. They're like a different model.
Okay.
Like,
all right.
I
Shots
think
fired.
most you can spend at an In-N-Out burger for one person is like maybe $15. Like you'd be hard pressed to do that. At Shake Shack, anything is $15. And so it's way more expensive. But I would say that like if I had to eat one of them for the rest of my life, and my wife and I were having this conversation the other day because we've gotten hooked into this YouTube channel called The Burger Show.
Okay. On
and
First We Feast?
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
because my wife's cousin works for the guy that's that chef that does the thing. He has Egg Slut, which is this restaurant in LA. And he was like saying, "Oh, you should check this thing out." And so we watched a couple of episodes of the burger thing, and they synthesized this difference as well as I think anybody could have about this dispute between Shake Shack and In-N-Out. And really it's like they're not really equivalent. And Shake Shack is like it's not like the California thing, it's like
Right.
In-N-Out Burgers, the original sort of California drive-through, that they kind of perfected that. And if you're from California like I am, I've never lived outside of the state. It's such a quintessential part of your kind of upbringing if you eat meat. And will have fast food burgers on occasion. I think that it's inescapable, that you wouldn't have In-N-Out, and I'm sure there's some equivalency for New
East
Yorkers
Coast.
or for because I think Shake Shack's from New York, right?
I think it's East Coast. The first time I had it, oddly enough, was in Chicago.
Oh, really?
So
The
yeah,
first time I had it was in Manhattan.
Oh, that's funny.
They just started opening Shake Shacks in California maybe a year ago. So for Californians, it's like a new thing, that they never knew about. But I think that I think In-N-Out is great. You got to order the right thing, but I think Shake Shack is unquestionably better quality. It's just not the same thing. This
All
is
right.
my evaluation.
Fair enough. Is there Five Guys out there yet? Five Guys burgers?
That exists. There's none around here, that, or at least that I'm aware of. But I have seen them around. I've never eaten at a Five Guys. I've only eaten In-N-Out and Shake Shack of the kind of the companies that get roped into that grouping of comparisons. Yeah.
It's pretty good. It's an East Coast thing, like Five Guys. So it's like I think the headquarters. So I'm in Baltimore, Maryland, and the headquarters is like an hour and a half from me in Maryland, which is hysterical. Okay. So, but it's totally an East Coast thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, Mason, thanks, man. Thank you so much for spending time with me and dropping some knowledge. Appreciate it a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to seeing how the your channel and I'm assuming you put this out on iTunes and podcasts as well, or is it
You
just
know what?
here?
I'm gonna have to talk to you about it because I haven't done that yet. I don't even know
Okay.
how to do it, man.
All right. Well, I'll try to do that. Yeah, it's easy. But this is great. I look forward to seeing how you evolve this as time goes on.
Cool. Thanks, man. Thanks for being number 2.
Yeah, sure.
All right. See you
See ya.
guys.